Hello everybody, welcome to R&B Reviews. I'm Rob and welcome to the second episode of Ask Rob. Basically, because of the coronavirus, or COVID-19 as it's properly called, the movie theaters, at least around here, are closed, so I'm not able to go out and review new movies. So I created this segment to allow you, viewers and subscribers, to ask me questions. So the last episode was uploaded last week. It seemed to do pretty well, and so I got a couple of brand new questions from two people, and actually they're the same two people that asked me questions last week. So I mean, don't be afraid to ask me questions. I will honestly answer them to the best of my ability. Alright, so let us begin. Alright, so the first question is from Jared Griffiths. Hey Jared, thank you again for posting questions. He's got 4 questions for me. What are your thoughts on the Pink Panther movies that were made without Peter Sellers, like Inspector Clouseau with Alan Arkin, Trail, Curse, and Son of the Pink Panther, and the Steve Martin Pink Panthers movies, if you've seen them? Honestly, Jared, the only one that I've seen is Trail of the Pink Panther. I like the stock footage they had of Peter Sellers. Well, basically, for those of you that are not familiar with the Pink Panther, it was a series of comedy films starring Peter Sellers as the bumbling, slapstick, silly Inspector Clouseau. The series began in 1964 with Peter Sellers, and then there was Shot in the Dark, and then the series went on hiatus for a while because director Blake Edwards and Peter Sellers did not really get along. They had the same sense of humor and they worked well together, but they sometimes, drove each other nuts. The series came back, I want to say it was 1975, called Return of the Pink Panther, and then Pink Panther Strikes Again, and then I believe the last film that Peter Sellers made as Inspector Clouseau was Revenge of the Pink Panther. Then of course he passed away. Inspector Clouseau was made in 1968 without Blake Edwards and without Peter Sellers, and then Blake Edwards tried to make 2 new Pink Panther movies using stock footage of Peter Sellers' Trail and Curse the Pink Panther. The series died, and then there's been a few spin-offs since then, or reboots, including the one with Steve Martin. So anyway, like I said, Trail the Pink Panther, ironically, was the first Pink Panther movie I saw. I had heard of the series, and I was familiar with the titles because I used to see it in catalogs, Pink Panther, but I never really had an inkling to see it, so I just happened to catch Trail the Pink Panther on TV, and I really liked the stock footage of Peter Sellers the best. Unfortunately, once they stopped using stock footage of him, I feel like I didn't really get into the movie very much anymore, so eventually I did go back and watch the regular Pink Panther series. I actually have all of them with Peter Sellers, and I really liked them very much. I'd say Shot in the Dark and Pink Panther Strikes Again are my favorite, and I think the one that I like the least is probably Revenge of the Pink Panther. Yeah, I have not seen the other non-Peter Sellers films, so yeah, but for me, Peter Sellers is Inspector Clouseau. I think that's another reason too. I just haven't really had the time or the interest to see the other spin-offs. Question number 2. I remember hearing back in 2014 there was going to be another Pink Panther movie, but it was going to be a live-action animated hybrid where the Pink Panther cartoon character was going to be the main character instead of Inspector Clouseau, and it was going to be directed by David Silverman, who is known for directing The Simpsons movie, and co-directing Monsters Incorporated. I know that movie will probably never get made at this point, but what are your thoughts on the concept? I don't know, I think the concept would be pretty nice. I think recently, of course, we got the Sonic the Hedgehog movie where you have live-action characters interacting with a cartoon character, and of course people like the classic Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But I think reviving the character would actually be a pretty good thing. I know people don't normally like remakes or reboots, but I feel like sometimes when a new version of a movie comes out, it helps a new generation track down the original work. Like, for example, many years ago, I remember IMDb would allow you to post comments back in the day when you could, post posts on different topics. I remember when Johnny Depp's Dark Shadows movie that was directed by Tim Burton came out. Now, I had known this because my mom grew up watching the TV show from the 60s, but a lot of people were unfamiliar with the Dark Shadows TV show. And I remember reading comments from people saying, that they went back and checked out some episodes from the original series and they got into it and they really liked it. So I think sometimes remaking or rebooting sometimes allows a new generation to know this other stuff exists. Feel free to check it out. And same thing with classic Doctor Who. When the new series came out, I remember when I was growing up, the classic Doctor Who series, at least where I lived, was a cult series. It wasn't very popular, not unless you were a die-hard fan. And then when the new series came out, it's like it opened up a new, generation, and people caught the old series as well. So sometimes it works, but I understand where some people are coming from in some cases. Question number 3, what are your thoughts on the Ernest movie if you've seen them? I've only seen the Christmas movie, and it's been a few years since I saw it. I remember being entertained by it, but I was like, it wasn't my favorite thing, but it was alright. But yeah, I've only seen the Christmas movie. And number 4, what are your thoughts on the Police Academy movies if you've seen them? I'm familiar with them, but I have not seen those films either. I heard the first couple are good, and then the series starts to kind of suck from there. I remember as a kid there was a Police Academy cartoon series, and I watched that one, but again, it's been a long time, so yeah. Sorry, Jared, I didn't see a lot of this stuff. Alright, and then the next group of questions is from Christopher Valencia, and I think he has 1, 2, 3, 4 questions for me as well. Question 1. Have you ever tried reading the original novel of a movie inspired by the book before the movie comes out? Honestly, I really have not. Very rarely has a book that I've read gets made into a movie later after, before reading it. Usually, if I like a movie, I'm curious about the novel, and if I got time, I usually come out and read it. For example, here, I'm actually in the process of reading it. Well, I'm almost done. I mean, this is a long, big-ass book, so I've been trying to read the, I saw the 90s miniseries, and of course I saw both parts of the new movie that came out in the last couple of years. And so I just wanted to see how different the book was to the movie, and that book is, really deep compared to the other movie and TV miniseries adaptations. So I've also read The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I read that after I think it came out in 2014. I read the book after the recent version with Leonardo DiCaprio came out. And also, I had recently read the book Blackbeard's Ghost after reviewing the movie version from Disney last fall. And I was amazed at how different the movie and the book were. So I do find time to read the novels when I can. It depends on if I really like the movie. I'm like, oh, and then I'm like, I wonder how the book is. But sometimes I'll watch the movie, even if some of them are based off of books. I'm like, you know what, it was alright, but I don't think I'm going to take the time out of my life to read these books. So it depends, but yeah. No, I usually have not read the book before the movie comes out. Maybe I should, though. His next question is, do you pay close attention to fill specs, camera angles, the directing and script, etc.? Yes, I do. When I review a movie, I do comment on these things in my videos. Often if a camera works and adds to the story, I will comment on it. And if the direction works or if it doesn't work. And same thing with the script. I do often comment on how effective or how ineffective all of those things are. Question 3. How far would you be willing to go into the movie industry? Or if not interested, how far do you think you would want to go? I don't know. I think if the opportunity came, I probably would want to work my way up so I could get familiar with how a production is done. And then afterwards, if I get a chance to direct, I might want to start out in indie films and figure out what I'm doing before tackling big budget studio pictures. Because I think that happens where some cases, because back in the 1930s and 40s, there used to be what they call A pictures, which were big budget important pictures, and then there were B pictures, which were usually about an hour long and cheaper. And if there was somebody that the studio thought would be a good director, they put in B pictures for a couple of years to figure out what they're doing and then move them on up. They don't really do that anymore, and sometimes I feel like when somebody is given a chance to direct a big budget picture and they haven't directed a movie before, sometimes it leads to issues. Like, for example, look at Josh Trank and the recent Fantastic Four remake. He had directed a low-budget picture, Chronicle. I think that was the only one he had done up to that point, and they gave him Fantastic Four and ended up being a bit of a cluster, in some levels. And same thing with the director who did the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street. He mainly directed music videos, and I don't think he's directed a movie since. And then sometimes I feel like that movie could have been better if the director had more experience with what he was doing. And even though I have not seen the recent Charlie's Angel movie that was directed by Elizabeth Banks, I keep hearing reviews saying that it's very choppy and that Banks didn't know what she was doing, and that's possible. Maybe that's possible. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be commenting on that since I haven't seen the picture. But if she doesn't have experience behind the camera. I think she only directed one other movie, which was Pitch Perfect 2, I think. But I mean, Yeah, you know, I think the days of getting somebody training and figuring out what to do are gone. That's why I feel like a lot of indie directors spend a few years and then some of them will go on to direct big budget pictures because they spend years figuring out how to do a production and how it works. And unfortunately, I feel like in this day and age, some directors who start out as special effects people or writers or music video directors, they're like, hey, direct this big budget movie for us, and sometimes it doesn't always work. I feel like they don't always know what they're doing because they don't have the experience, but you know, that's me. And finally, his last question. Have you ever seen a film with such a good soundtrack in it that you liked every song off the original motion picture album? When I read this question, I had a couple come to mind. One of them is the movie American Graffiti that George Lucas made in 1973 before Star Wars. You should check this movie out. It's set in the 1962, and it's basically a group of high schoolers, I believe, on the last night before history has changed, because, you know, in the future you get JFK getting assassinated, you get the British invasion and stuff, and it has songs from like the 50s and early 60s, and it really complements the movie very well, so I recommend checking that movie out. And another one that came to my mind is Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Alright, well, thank you two very much for your questions. So, I mean, I would like to continue doing this series a little bit longer, so, I mean, please feel free to leave any questions or comments for me about the movies, about, you know, anything I've done. You know, feel free to post your comments below and your questions. I do greatly appreciate it. And Jared and Chris, thank you very much for your questions today. Alright, well, thank you very much for watching. Please like the video, and if you're interested, consider being a subscriber, and go back and look at some movies that you can watch, well, if the theaters are closed right now, stuff that maybe you can watch at home. Alright, thank you very much for watching, and we'll find out whether there'll be a third episode next Monday or not. Take care.